20-year-old Emily Parker had always been a good student, but recently she had been struggling with math. No matter how hard she tried, the numbers never seemed to add up. With her midterm exam approaching, anxiety weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had promised her mother, Mrs. Parker, that she would do well. Her mother was strict about honesty and discipline, always reminding Emily that integrity mattered more than grades. But as the exam day neared, Emily panicked. The night before the test, she stared at her textbook, feeling hopeless. Then, an idea crept into her mind. A shortcut. She scribbled some formulas on a small piece of paper and tucked it into her sleeve. Just a backup, she told herself. I probably won't even need it. But when the test began, Emily found herself overwhelmed. The questions were harder than she had expected. Her heart pounded. As she hesitated. Then, in moment of desperation, she glanced at the hidden paper and copied the formulas. She thought she had gotten away with it, but as she finished writing her last answer, a shadow loomed over her desk. Emily, her teacher, Mr. Daniels, said in a cold, disappointed voice, "What is that in your hand?" Emily's blood ran cold. She tried to hide the paper, but it was too late. Mr. Daniels picked it up and examined it. "Cheating is a serious offense," he said. "You know the rules." The class fell silent as all eyes turned to Emily. Shame washed over her as Mr. Daniels took her test and marked a large 0 across the page. "You will report to the principal's office immediately," he said. Emily's legs felt weak as she walked down the hallway. When she reached Principal Holloway's office, she knew she was in deep trouble. The principal listened to Mr. Daniels's report, then leaned forward with a stern look. "Emily, I never expected this from you," he said. "Cheating is not just about breaking the rules, it's about breaking trust. I have no choice but to inform your mother." Emily's heart sank. If there was one person she feared disappointing, it was her mother. When Mrs. Parker arrived, her face was unreadable, but Emily could see the disappointment in her eyes. After discussing the matter with the principal, Mrs. Parker took Emily home in silence. Once they arrived, Mrs. Parker sat Emily down in the living room. "I want you to explain yourself," she said, her voice calm but firm. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. "I was scared," she admitted. "I didn't want to fail." Mrs. Parker shook her head. "And instead of asking for help, you chose to cheat? I raised you better than that. Emily, hard work and honesty are more important than any grade." Emily lowered her head. "I know, I messed up." Mrs. Parker's voice hardened. "There must be consequences for this, Emily. You will be grounded for a month. No phone, no TV, no outings, and I will personally oversee your studies every night until your next test. But first, you need to understand how serious this is." She reached for the wooden paddle she kept for discipline. Emily knew what was coming. She winced as her mother administered several firm swats, reinforcing the lesson with each one. When it was over, Mrs. Parker sat beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I don't do this to hurt you, Emily. I do it because I love you. I want you to be an honest, responsible person, and I never want to hear of you cheating again." Emily wiped her tears and nodded. "I promise, Mom. Never again." The next day, she returned to school with a heavy heart but a clear conscience. She apologized to Mr. Daniels, who, though disappointed, encouraged her to learn from the mistake. From that day forward, Emily worked harder. She stayed late for extra tutoring and asked for help when she needed it. When she finally took her next math test, she passed, not with a perfect score, but with something far more valuable: honesty.